If I could call order, please, at 7 o'clock, this meeting is now open. I'd just like to go over a couple of things just before we get into the body of the meeting. As you can see, again, film recording is taking place. We are actually taking a voice recording of the meeting as well. This is only for continuity purposes. The request has been made for a microphone. I don't think I need one, but it was noted that members could be heard clearly in the last meeting. We haven't been able to sort out a microphone yet. Basically, the problem we've had is that the theatre's been used all last week and speakers and things like that aren't back in place. We will endeavour to sort that out for the next meeting. If members can help by trying to talk a little bit louder, please. And then just the other thing, we did have a slight problem with it last meeting, so I'd just like to reiterate to people, this meeting is only, the public session and participation is only for residents of Dinnington. Anyone else is quite welcome to observe, but please don't interrupt the meeting or try to engage in conversation or debate. It is only for residents of Dinnington. Right, I'll go to the agenda. And the first part, as normal, is we'll go to the public part of the meeting. We have 3 questions. I'll try and allocate time to all 3 questions equally. The first question is David Smith.
Does this council believe that the councillors who knew about child sex exploitation in Rotherham and did nothing are fit people to represent Dinnington?
I'll open it up to councillors to comment or come back on.
There's a few things I'd like to say on this. What gets me, there are hundreds of children being abused. So there must be thousands of people aware of this. There must be. Why was no one else picking up on this? Where was the opposition? The opposition council? Where was the press? The press is generally ready to queer any problem with Rotherham Council. When it came to light, everybody go out to the woodwork. They jumped on the back of it, jumped on the bandwagon. Where were they before? Just jumping on councillors. But there must be hundreds of people aware of what was going on. Tell me that.
Well,
Okay,
it's
after
not for the public to answer questions.
Well, that's my
I'll answer it for him if you want. I'll answer it for him. It's very strange that we have a Labour councillor who wants to say, where was the opposition? Why there were hundreds of girls? There weren't hundreds, there were 1,400, which is a Conservative estimate. It's now gone up to 1,500. Don't ask yourself where were the public. Don't ask yourself where were the opposition. Why don't you ask yourself where were your councillors? 66 councillors on Rotherham Borough Council, only 2 opposition. 64 councillors, Labour councillors new. Let's just go through it, shall we? Councillor Avenham and Wardle were at the 2005 seminar on child sexual exploitation, the one that the J report gave unambiguous information on CSE. She also said after this, no one could say they did not know. 9th of July 2008, Councillors Falvey, Avenham and Tweed, along with Sean Wright, who was the Cabinet Member and he chaired this meeting of the Children and Young People's Services. At this meeting, they discussed a major report on child sexual exploitation in Rotherham. In June 2005, I haven't finished yet, in June 2005, Councillor Avenham became an advisor to Sean Wright on children and young people's services. She eventually attained the position of senior advisor. She stayed in this position throughout the 5-year tenure of Wright and was still in that position when Larkin took over Wright's position. She attended several meetings in her capacity as senior advisor where in-depth discussions on CSE had taken place and decisions made. Some of these were 13th of June 2007, 9th of July 2008, 26th of November 2008, 21st of June 2009. Bearing in mind she'd also, as I've already pointed out, attended the 2005 seminar on CSE. Now Larkin tonight, answering questions to the Communities and Local Government Committee, said that when he took over the Children and Young People's Services, it was at best chaotic. 11th of June 2008, Councillor Tweed became an advisor to Wright and stayed in his position for 2 years. So Dinnington is in the sorry position of having 4 councillors who knew about the sexual exploitation of children but deny all knowledge, but even worse, did nothing. But more importantly, Councillor Averhand stated at the last council meeting, and you've got this minuted, that she had searched her memory and her conscience and had nothing to be ashamed of. Well, I think she should look again. She was a member of Wright's Department for Children and Young People's Services for over 5 years, most of which time she was senior advisor. She knew as much as Wright, and if Wright had to go, it must follow the two that she should go. The same goes for Councillor Tweed, who also was an advisor to Wright for 2 years. Councillor Falvey attended a meeting along with her 2 fellow councillors of the Children and Young People's Services, where a major report on CSE was discussed and decisions made. She should go because, like all the others, she said nothing and did nothing. Councillor Wardle attended the 2005 seminar where explicit details on CSE was given. He also stayed quiet whilst our children were being raped and abused, and he should go. The people of Dinnington deserve better. The children of Rotherham deserve better. They should go, and they should go now. And if you, Councillor Colton, want to ask a question, ask them lot.
I'm making no excuses for what went on. It's a sorry state of affairs. But you throw out about Jackie and Jane. From what I can understand, they had these meetings, they opened them up, and they was warned to keep quiet for the safety of the children. Now, if you had been in that meeting and you'd been warned to keep quiet, would you run your mouth?
For 9 years?
Yes, you should do. Children are important.
For 9 years?
Of course they're important.
Order, please.
For 9
Order.
years? They kept quiet for 9 years?
Order.
Not even asked a question on it?
Right.
Could you minute that? She just said order.
I'll say no, Jackie.
I will bring in... Yes.
You know, Jackie and Jane, they do more for young people in this area.
What?
Rubbish.
Of course they are, we've seen from us.
That's the point, Mr. Chairman. That's the whole point. That's the whole point. Councillor, that's the whole point. They knew about child sexual exploitation. Both of them knew. Both of them knew about it, and they were involved. They even had a meeting. They were both at a meeting of the Children and Young People's Services that actually kicked into touch a request by Safe at Last to help finance a safe house in Rotherham for runaway children. That's how good they are. And that's how much help they've been. And what are you going to tell us? Are you going to tell us because they got these council buildings for Jade that they fiddled?
So you're objecting to council meeting for Jade?
You are?
You're objecting to that about Jade, apparently.
Yeah, I am.
I do believe that we are moving away from the subject of the question.
No, we're not.
I will bring in Lewis, but you've got to be very quick because we did at the start of this say I would allocate equal time to each question, and we're now just about to overrun.
Yeah, well, all I'd say is if you want an answer to your question, look at what Paul Lakin's just been saying to the Parliamentary Committee. He said that when he was a cabinet member himself, the leader and the deputy leader themselves were actively obstructive in bringing forward an independent report. That's because these things were being actively covered up by certain members of the ruling Labour Party, and the rest of the backbenchers did nothing to bring them to account. And don't believe me, go and find Paul Lakin's statement, what he's made today, and he's more or less just said exactly what I've said. He's also said the widespread monopoly that Labour's enjoyed in Rotherham for years and years played a big part, because there was no credible opposition to have any check and balance against anything Labour was doing. He's basically, you know, put his cards down and said, this is what happened. So you don't have to believe us, believe him. And all I can say is that I think the last time the then deputy leader came to Dinnington was the consultation on the children's centres, and it made me absolutely sick to my stomach knowing what that bloke was up to at the time. And by that time everyone knew his true colours, and every member of the town council who attended that meeting was gathered round him at the end like he was some kind of rock star. And I have to say that made me absolutely sick to watch that.
Can I just come into
I'm
this?
not making
Yeah.
any excuses for them. What I'm trying to say, a lot of other people do, and nobody else was doing it.
I'll tell you when I
They
knew.
don't represent Dinnington.
I knew when Laura Wilson got murdered, there was the serious case review. That's when it hit the mainstream press. And even then, the likes of the leader and the deputy leader, who at that time you would have been telling us were the best thing since sliced bread, they actively tried to keep that. They actually tried to keep the serious case review out of the public eye, all to protect themselves and all to protect some misguided concept of racial harmony in Rotherham. This was happening just a couple of years ago, and that's the first time I knew about it, right? Now, I've since spoken to people who lived in Ferrum at the time, and they've said locally, basically loads of people knew about it. So you're right, Labour councillors weren't the only people in Rotherham who knew about it. Quite happy to agree with you there, but they were one of the few people in Rotherham who actually had the power to do anything about it. And at worst, they were incompetent and they didn't ask the questions they should have asked. And absolutely at worst, some of them actively covered it up for their own interests. And I'm talking about the people at the very top of the Labour Party in Rotherham.
I'll just, right, I'll let you come back to it, and then I'll move this question on, because we're not going to get the other questions in on time. If you want to come back to it.
A lot of people know about this. I think, personally, I think that the main culprit was police. Because they were standing with a book. But for them to ask a question, I'm thinking like Jackie and Jim, right? For them to ask a question, who would they go to? Did they go to the people above them who were responsible, and did they go to Did they go to same answer? They told them everything was all right. They did great about it. So they went to the people.
They were on the cabinet. They were members of the cabinet. They were senior advisor. Jane Avenan was senior advisor to Sean Wright. Sean Wright was the cabinet member for Children and Young People's Services. She and him had got a right to bring it to the public's notice. They failed to do that. They had several reports, 2002, 2006, two major reports on child sexual exploitation given to the Borough Council, and the Borough Council did nothing. My question is, and not one of you have got the guts to answer it, my question to this council is, do you think that they're fit people to represent Dinnington? I say they're not. What do you say? Because you're not answering it, are you?
Right, I did say before that introduction that your comeback was the last part of this question. I have got to be fair, and I will move on to the next question now. Unfortunately, we are going to be short on time, and I hope we can get both questions in. Second, excuse me, I did say right at the start of this meeting, if you're not a resident, do not speak at this meeting.
Why don't you answer the question? I've asked the question. Why don't you answer it? You're not going to listen. You've got the problem for this. The problem for Rotherham is the fact that people like you are shit scared to answer this question, and I apologise for swearing. You're scared stiff to answer this question. You don't. Get lost. Don't talk stupid, man. Listen. Answer the question. Answer the question.
Yeah.
Does this council believe that they failed?
Just listen.
Mr. Sadler, if you ask your question now, you are quite welcome to.
Excuse me.
If you talk anymore, I will ask you to leave. You have been told you are not allowed to speak at this meeting. Please sit down or leave the meeting now.
Stop shouting at me, and if you threaten me anymore, I will
speak now or we move on.
If I'd rather withdraw my question and have the time used for further discussion, because this is more important than the question I wanted to ask about the miners' welfare. So I'd rather the extra time was used to discuss this.
If you wish not to ask the question, we'll move to the next question, and after that question we'll terminate the public session.
And that, in the other case, what you're saying is that you're not going to continue on with
this.
I am a resident. I've been a resident for 46 years of Dinnington, in the same house.
Will you ask a question or do you want us to move on?
Me?
He didn't say that. He said he wanted to give it
I'd rather the time was used to discuss this.
No.
He's not going to
this
do
question, or I'll move to the last question.
Okay, in that case, my question was about the miners' welfare, which has now been demolished. What arrangements, because I know there's essentially been some informal arrangements, have been made to replace it? And are there any actual formal arrangements that guarantee that the building will be replaced? I also find it a bit weird that we've got, we're shortly going to be looking at a planning application to decide whether or not planning permission is required to demolish it, whether it's actually been demolished. Is there any update on the situation?
Can I answer your question?
Yeah.
Very specifically, there are no arrangements by this council for any buildings or premises on that site.
Right, so the borough councillors at that meeting, the town councillors at that meeting, the friends of the miners' welfare at that meeting, they all agreed to essentially ignore this and let it go through, and made some kind of informal arrangements to give a third of the miners' welfare land over on condition that, you know, the demolition went through unopposed on the... I don't know what kind of guarantees you got that we were going to get a replacement.
I've given the answer.
Well, I'm afraid we don't have any answers.
I've given you...
Because this should have been done in public, and it was done in a closed meeting, as I said last month, and essentially we don't know where we are now. All that we know is that Park House is gone. There's been some informal behind-the-scenes arrangement to allow house building on the area that's going to make Siswo, the landowner, a lot of money. What I want to know is, are we going to get something out of it? Is Dinnington going to get something from it? If so, great. But where's the agreement? Where's the guarantee that that's going to happen? What's going to stop Siswo from just pulling out?
I'll say to you once more, Dinnington Town Council has no agreements in place. Do members have anything else to come back on this?
Well, apparently, this is from two different people who were at that meeting, and it's fair to say both people I've spoken to are polar opposites in terms of their opinion. They both told me that the entire meeting waved this through. They agreed to let the demolition go ahead, and they agreed in principle that a third of the land be given over to housing developers. This has been agreed, but it's not been debated in a town council. But both.
We consider them, you can build.
Were you at the meeting? Were you at the meeting?
Yeah.
Well, this is what I'm being told by different people.
Oh,
Those present at the meeting agreed. It wasn't. It essentially went through unopposed. And I mean, I'm not even against it, so long as there's some kind of a guarantee that when some of that land's given over to house building, some of the money's going to go back to Dinnington. As far as I can see, if we don't have some kind of guarantee and agreement from CISWO, they could sell a part of that land, or perhaps even more of it, and just walk away and not leave us with anything.
They can't sell land.
At the moment, it's down as recreational land, right? So the NPPF would say that they can't take it away without replacing it with something. So we had something, we had a bit of ammunition there, but now if all the various interested parties don't, you know, let this go through and don't oppose it, you know, in the hope that we might get something back later, I mean, that's great, but do we actually have any agreement that that will take place? Or have we just got Kevin Barron's word for it? And while I'm on that subject to Kevin Barron, why did he find it necessary to kick members of the Friends of the Miners' Welfare out the meeting?
On to another subject altogether from you asking the question.
That's fair enough. I'm just looking for answers. If anyone would like to give me one, I'd be really grateful.
The question's been answered, but did Mr. Jepson say?
Yeah, I've not had a close look at the sites and policy document. I don't know if anybody else has. It's been published today. Does it actually say part recreation and part residential?
No, there's no guarantees given.
On the one I've seen, it just says residential for the area. There's no identification for any recreational or any other use. So if that's the case, then you know, other areas of recreation are being identified. But that appeared to me just to be for residential use. So on that current basis, I've not had a detailed look through it. There appears to be nothing other than housing proposed on that site.
Okay, we have answered the questions, so I will move on to the final question. We are looking short of time on this one, but...
Well, I'm going to say, Chair, do you want to push it into the general matters? Because it's under the running file item from last meeting.
Which item of the running file is it?
So it's local plan. It's 139/14 general
it's in the
matters.
minutes, we can't discuss minutes, they're only for approval. So if we want to talk about it now, we can, but
Right.
once we're into the minutes, we can't.
Right, okay. Well, yeah, if I can just say, at the last meeting, there was one of the councillors, Councillor Jepson, sought reassurance that the council's stance on being opposed to building on Greenbelt land had not changed, and that the members, borough councillors, will represent this view in an RMBC meeting later this week that was expected to vote on the core strategy. Councillor Tweed stated DTC still upheld its statement against building on Greenbelt land. I seem to remember, and probably other people here do, that Councillor Tweed gave an assurance that they would object to the core strategy. Unfortunately, when that vote was taken, they didn't do that. Neither he nor Councillor Avenham voted against it. So you've actually mandated two of your councillors to turn to that meeting, object to it, but they didn't do it. The only objections came from the opposition. Councillor Finney wasn't there. See, it says that he was to be contacted about the core strategy meeting. He didn't attend it because he was in a car accident on the way there. But all the other UKIP councillors, myself as an independent, two Conservatives, were the only ones that objected to it. So your two borough councillors at that meeting have not followed what the town council said they wanted them to do and what they said they would do.
Well, normally I wouldn't like borough business being discussed, but if it helps... Jepson.
As you well know, Clive,
Yeah,
at that meeting,
yeah.
and first of all, we didn't have a mandate as borough councillors to from here.
Well, you said at that meeting you were going to object to
I
it.
didn't interrupt you, so please
Go on then.
let me finish.
Talk your way out.
I'm not talking way out of it. I know you were trying to make political things
No,
out
not
of
at
it,
all.
but let me finish.
No, I'm
I
not.
know you do. I know I like to sit on both sides at times, but yeah. We
I
don't
think
have
you're
a
making
mandate from
political
here.
points now.
Right, what we did,
Yes.
we had an agreement with the leader, which was Roger. No, let me finish before you... No, I didn't...
Roger wasn't there then.
Let me finish before you had an agreement that we could vote against it. That was fine. Roger said that. On the day when we went, Paul Lakin's now the new leader and the new deputy, and said, we've got this agreement. No, you can't vote against it. I said, well, we're not voting for it. And his hands, did you see our hands go up? Did you see our hands vote for it?
No, you didn't. You abstained.
Right.
But that's not objective, as you said you were going to do at that meeting.
Right.
So you've been told, you've basically been whipped to told what you've got to do. Sorry, but that's just absolute rubbish. If you're that afraid of your position on the Borough Council not to stick your hand up, you would have 50 odd votes in favour. 50 odd votes in favour and you don't put your hand up against it.
I'll answer as many questions as you want, but, as I said, I know sometimes you try to play...
No, I don't at all.
Never mind.
Come on, Simon, I'm for supporting Dinnington as a resident. I'm not playing politics like you are.
I don't play politics.
Well, you don't do politics, that's the problem.
May I just
You don't.
May I just
You're told what to
interject?
do by other people.
Clive, may I just...
Sorry, Chair.
I did say that this was for a business, but I would allow it. It's taken us down a route where, as town councillors, we have objected to building on Greenbelt. We've objected to the core strategy in its entirety. We still,
I know you
we, as a town council, still hold that opinion. So there is no amendments called for.
So essentially
that.
Borough
Keep
Council
quiet,
then.
I've asked you twice now.
Essentially Borough Council then.
Who are you talking
You
to?
talk to people
And-
who are offensive, Mr Chair.
That is still the case. I think we're pretty much, as town council, we're still strong in our determination against that.
So essentially a Borough
I'm
Council.
glad to hear that, but I don't see how a Borough Councillor can have one opinion as a town councillor and then another one as a Borough Councillor.
For the ward councillors.
Well, I think they should be answerable. I appreciate that, Chair. You take that decision here, but you've got two people who are Borough Councillors and Town Councillors. They've voted to object it as a Town Councillor, but when they turn up as a Borough Councillor, they vote a different way or they don't vote, because somebody's told them what they should do or shouldn't do. And I find that appalling.
But
They're elected by the people of Dinnington,
Yes,
and if they agree with that here, they should follow it through, come hell or high water. What have they got to lose?
as your question,
Some money.
I think I've
No,
quite clearly
I appreciate
answered
that.
the question. And I mean, we don't need to reconfirm. We've not changed in any way ourselves.
So can I just add one further? When it comes to the vote on the sites and policies next year, if the Town Council follows this through and objects to the planned housing development on Greenbelt in Dinnington, and the two Borough Councillors vote the same way as the rest of the Town Council to object, and then they turn up at the sites and policies again when it's brought to full council, are they going to support it or object to it at that point again? Because it's still going to go down the same route.
I can't get into
Does that
the
depend on whether we have a
internal
deal
politics
with
of
And
RBC.
there
I
will
can
be
only
the
tell you,
there will be the inspectors' hearings again on the same thing, because you went to it, I went to it,
and
Councillor Russell, Councillor Davis did, and you did your bit. Councillor Evans was at the consultation last week, or the briefing meeting, and just to let everybody know, there's an event here on the 6th of November at the Resource Centre for the sites and policies, and that's the one consultation that the entire southern area of Rother Valley is getting on that document. So if people don't go to it, they're going to miss out.
well, we will actively publicise.
Well, I know you will, you did that last time, and I appreciate that.
Yeah,
But I think it is important.
now, I'm going to have to move on because we've had the half an hour. But just to reiterate, our stance is still the same as it always has been. Right, if I can move on from public session now, and just to remind members of the public again that this is now not an open discussion. It may be that if you do have relevant or pertinent information on these, members may allow it to come in, but unless you're invited to, please let us come to the meeting. The item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence. I have no apologies. That's okay. Moving on to item 2, any matters considered urgent by the chair? I have nothing urgent to bring into the meeting. Item 3 is consider matters that should be dealt with in open or confidential session. Any members feel that any items should be taken into confidential session? No? Right, if we can move on to item 4, which is minutes of previous meetings, I'd just like to remind councillors that these are for amendment or approval only and not as discussion items. So if we can go to page 1. No? Page 2. Page 3. I've actually got 2 amendments that Councillor Jepson wants me to bring up. I'm just looking for the actual items. Yeah. So, page 4. Oh, sorry. Yeah, page 4. Page 5. Okay. Councillor Jepson wishes to make 13714B, which is right at the top of page 5. Yeah, it reads that he asked for the monthly accounts to be made available on the day of the meeting. He didn't, he just asked for them to be prior to the meeting. Okay, and 13814A, we've got it down as agreed. He didn't agree to it, so he wants it posted as a majority decision. Okay, so we continue down page 5. Page 6. So the rule does a true record. Second. Show of hands for that, please. Great. Item 5 is declarations of interest. Steve, you've got something more you've got interest in? Salvation you don't have to declare an interest when you can talk about it, but can't vote on it. So, what's the
Page number 8 changes
Salvation Army?
Yes, very close.
Very close. Okay. Any other interest? No? Right. Consider any matters raised in public session. I have no items raised. Item 7 is planning. Yep. Right. Item A, first item, display of the non-illuminated fascia sign. We have had some notes on this one, and there has been an extension until the 14th, which is tomorrow. So if we have any objections to it, we're still in time. Does anybody have any comments about the non-illuminated sign? No? Okay, we'll move on to item B, which is the erection of detached garage. Got the items there. As of today, there have been no objections. No other notes to give you. Any discussions on that item or objections? No? Right, we'll move on to C, which is replacement of the fascia sign for the Salvation Army. You have the information there. We have no more relevant information. We've had no objections as of today. Any comments or objections? Move on to an item that has already been mentioned in public. This is for an application to determine whether prior approval is required for the method of demolition and restoration of the site, demolition of former miners' welfare.
It's down, it's flat.
Please, I did reiterate, let's talk between the members first. I think we all know, and I will tell everyone, if you don't already know, we received notification of this last Tuesday, the 30th. I actually drove past the site the day after the fair had left on the Monday and had already started. So, members, do you have any comments? I'm sure, well, in fact I have, but I'll open it to the floor first. Good point. If I can bring Clark in, because we've actually done some investigations into this, the consultation
My application was 16th of November. I have consequently emailed the project officer to say that and if before the consultation date, I have yet to receive a report back.
Could you
Can you
speak
address
up?
that?
Things then we speak.
Yeah, I'll repeat that, yeah. What I just said to the councillors there was that the consultation end date for this particular plan application was the 16th of November. And I emailed the project officer at RMBC straight back to say, why have we only just received this and why has it been demolished before the consultation end date for this particular planning application, and I have yet to receive a reply back on that. So the objections that you guys obviously mentioned were picked upon straight away, but not an answer yet.
I don't think it's a fact that we're objecting. No, you can wait a minute.
You can ask to come into the meeting, and I'm sure, as you've already stated, you're
And for the top near there, why weren't we informed that it was going to happen?
Talk through the chair. If you wish to discuss this item, we're quite happy, I'm sure, to move a resolution for you to speak.
Oh, don't worry, next time I come to this meeting, I'm going to be ready.
No.
Welcome.
Are you making notification that you'd like to put a personal point to this point?
The point is...
No. Don't
Say yes.
Are you?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Right. Members, can we move for a resolution for... Sorry.
Mary Matthews.
Mary Matthews to speak on this particular point. Will someone move it? Second?
He can't speak. He's a trustee. He should be in the room as a trustee.
Thank you.
Who's a trustee?
You're quite welcome to speak.
Right, thank you. I've been living at the top of the Lawdens Hill now for 46 years, in the same house. I've used the welfare, and I am part of Safe at Last, as we used to have our meetings there. The thing is that you always seem to be putting posters round when people want certain things doing. Why weren't we informed and even to be notified that the children couldn't go around there to play because of all the buildings that have been, you know, the buildings being knocked down and all the machinery. Nobody was notified. Nobody at all was notified that that was going ahead. And I think by just decency, just to drop a note through or stick a poster up on the wall. But nobody did.
As I think Clark has just said, the fact we were told that they'd only just put an application in for it to be done, the day after it had actually
Somebody's
started.
given them permission to do it.
Correct. Which is
And if
what,
they haven't, somebody wants the backside to
which
kick
is
in.
what the clerk has already said. We've asked planning to explain to us why that happened.
Planning seems to have a rule for themselves and stuff anybody else.
We cannot do any more than ask them to explain themselves.
Yes, but what if they don't?
We won't let it go. We will get an answer.
It's a bit late in the day now, isn't it?
Well, this is why we
They should have had their heads jumped
still
on
have to
a
talk
long
about
time
it.
ago.
We still have to talk about it, but unfortunately, as you said, it's too late. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't follow it to the end.
Bear in mind, Mr Chairman,
I
at
will
that meeting you've got
now
two members that...
ask members for
You've got two planning
Mr. Lewis has
members.
indicated he would like to bring a pertinent point in on this. Can someone, if they wish, move that he speaks? A second to it? Seconded. Show of hands for speaking.
Well, I'd just like to point out that the members of the town council who were present at the meeting, facilitated by our local MP, essentially agreed to this. Why are you having this discussion about a planning application that, you know, of course you don't object, you agreed to it at that meeting. Let's just come clean. Why don't we just say what happened at that meeting? Get it out in public, and then we'll all know where we are.
I think you'll find that the first things that should happen before anything happens like this is that an application is put in and the application is discussed. The point of this is that no one was given the opportunity to discuss the planning application.
Didn't you discuss the demolition at the meeting?
That's irrelevant to the point we're talking about.
It's very relevant.
That we should have talk on the planning application.
Yeah, two members.
Right.
Of course it's relevant whether or not you agreed to the work that's being done. You're having a discussion here about whether or not to object to a proposal. We all know that you said, go ahead guys, through some kind of verbal agreement or something, I don't know, but you basically said to Ciswo, okay, take a third of the land, give that to the housing developers, we'll trust to look or have some verbal agreement that we'll get a replacement for Park House, and we'll basically not object if you knock it down. So why are we having this discussion?
Mr.
You know,
James,
I don't understand.
you're supposed to be giving pertinent information, not to discuss. If you have pertinent information, I will seek members to allow to speak on the side. Will somebody move the resolution for Mr. Jepson to speak on this item? And seconded, and vote for... 1, 2, 3, 4.
Thanks, Chair. Just to make a point, I did look at the planning application. I think the demolition started on the 29th of September, and the application was only put in on the Monday prior to that. And I think what you'll probably find out of this is one of these strange anomalies of planning, but if you read it through, it says application to determine whether prior approval is required. Well, it's one of these that they don't have to wait, I think. If they decide that prior approval is not required, they can okay that demolition straight away. It just makes a bit of a nonsense that you have a sort of consultation period up to the 16th of November. Obviously, when that application went in, they decided fairly quickly that they didn't need any prior approval. They could go ahead and do it as long as they submitted their demolition plans, and now they were going to deal with risk assessment. That's as much as they needed to do. So it's a bit of a fallacy that you would stop it because the thing had been determined already that it was okay to go ahead and try. I think that's probably the explanation that the clerk will get from planning, that they don't have to wait for that.
When we read it, it read differently to a normal application.
Yes, it is different.
That's what we've asked for explanation on. I think you've given us the answer there.
It's just to determine whether an application is needed. If they say no, then they can carry on and do it. There's no sort of formal consultation.
That's what we were seeking. We have one more before we move on.
Can I just...
Yeah.
That meeting, we were invited, not to make decisions, we were invited to listen. It was nothing to us, it wasn't up to us to make decisions. The land doesn't belong to us, the building didn't belong to us. We can't say you can pull that down when it's not ours. We can't say you can build houses on that land when it's not ours. We'll listen to the argument, and then we're up to them. If they wanted to do that, We said it's up to you. You've got to make a decision.
Can I answer that? Because it's addressed to me.
It's not a discussion item.
So I have the right to reply.
I'm sorry, but the way it is, you can bring information to us, but it's not a discussion.
Well, I'll bring some information to you by way of a reply then.
To Mr. Smith making notice that he'd like to speak. Again, it's not for discussion, it's if you're bringing pertinent information to the meeting. Sorry? No, we're still planning. Would someone move a resolution for Mr. Smith to speak on this item?
He can't make a resolution as a trustee. He should be in the room to discuss it.
I will take that point.
About 6 times.
You are moving for Mr. Smith to speak. Any seconders?
He's taking it. Doing it.
Seconded. So, votes for the motion? Votes? Yeah. I know, but in the Localism Act, this is exactly how these things should be. And I'm sure you'll agree that we should keep to the letter of law on that. Please, Mr. Smith.
Just the point that I accept Town Council's point that they didn't have any say in it. Sizwell are the land grabbers. They'd be...
Can you speak up?
I normally stand up, but I thought I'd be polite here. I take the point that Town Council didn't have any say and wouldn't have been able to make any decision on whether or not the land grabbers, Sizwell, knocked down Park House. The point is, though, is that you've got the local MP there, the Town Council there, you've got a member of Friends of Dinnington Miners Welfare who is on the planning committee. I mean, he's walked out because of planning. He didn't do that at that meeting. But you'd also got 2 members from the planning board, from Rotherham Borough Council Planning Board. So one would presume that what happened is that they did a runner straight back to Rotherham and it got passed and Park House got demolished. They had to do it pretty quick because they knew that there'd be people that would object to it. But it's the fact that you can't say that you didn't take any part in it either, because you took part in the fact that you've got planners there, you've got the MP there, you've got one of the members of the planning board there, and you acquiesced to it. So as far as I'm concerned, you may not have been able to stop it, but you didn't make any objections either.
Thank you for the information. Right, I think we've had it explained by Mr. Jepson, actually, the wording of it and how it can be done, but we will still see more information about why it happened, and we'll try and bring that information back to you. I don't think there's any more we can do on this one until that information comes back to us. So we'll move on from planning. Next slide. Can order, please? We'll move on to item 8, which is booking concessions and donations. We have a presentation from Councillor Scott.
Yes, it's just that established out in the loose place is an older...
Could you speak up, please?
Salvation Army and the Lyric Players are going to hold a Christmas Carol concert in the Lyric, and all the proceeds and profit will go to the food bank in Dinnington, which the Salvation Army run. So I'm just asking if we could let them have the room free for that evening, obviously, because the more funds they raise, the more goes towards the food bank.
So I,
Just ask clarity, Steve. You said all profits were good at food bank. Is it obviously divided between Salvation Army and the employees? I thought Annie told yeah, I mean, just be talking kind of carpet, and Annie told me that it was going to be divided between both, but I just, yeah, just making sure the clarity of what minutes of that through.
You think something else different?
Yeah.
well, both figures.
Yeah.
So the clarification is
It's
it's equally divided between the
Lyric
two
Players are going to do an
organisations.
activity play and then we have a grass band, etc.
Okay, so
I'll propose that we give
three years.
Yeah.
Second. Okay, and those in favour of that one? No? Oh, there's a three. That's unanimous, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you. 9. For members' consideration and decisions, I can bring all the dates and please.
When we had our global event on September 13th, I had no help on the Friday when we were setting it on, or I got my son. On the Saturday, I would like the staff that worked all day, they can have a remuneration of some kind because they spent the whole day, 3 of the staff, at their own expense, helping. Otherwise, I don't know where we would have been. All I'm asking is, can they have a little bit extra for their help?
Well, on your notes, basically, on my notes, what suggestions have you got for what Councillor Davis has asked for? Yep. To remunerate the bylaws. Yeah. So,
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, in the kitchen, and you've got the broken arm. All I'm saying is, all I wanted is a bit of extra for the staff. To give their time. It was the council's rights to give their time. It was our...
we've got a proposal that we pay them for the day, and we've had a second on that. So, unless there's any amendments to that, show hands. Yeah. Yeah. It's just the two staff, isn't it? Susan, well, right, we can move on to item 10. We are probably approximately 50% through the agenda now. Do you want to carry on through, or would you like to
Go through.
carry on through? Okay. Right, okay, so item 10A is CCTV Park Avenue Cemetery. We've got an update on that.
Yeah, I've had one call back, just shy of 3,000 calls for a CCTV system covering the main areas of the cemetery. It doesn't cover, it won't cover the compound, it won't cover the entrance, the areas where any injuries have got in the past, plus the children's great area as well. Basically, areas where we've experienced issues. I've gone out to 2 others and I'm still waiting for them to get back, so I can't provide the quotes as we speak, but I haven't still following that through. So I think we need to keep that.
Is there a reason why the compound can't be?
Yeah, because of line of sight and access to power, because of massive trees in the way.
I suppose you'll see,
There is an intruder alarm in the compound as we speak anyway.
you'll see on the areas that what they can get through to get to the compound, you'll pick up anybody.
Correct, and that's why they looked at that option when they bought the site. Yeah.
Any other questions on that? We'll move on. It was just for an update. Item B, which is cremation plots, and you have some information, a letter from a gentleman and a proposal.
It wasn't very clear from
No.
this that was a cremation plot.
Yeah, the request is that I think we already have some plots, or at least one plot, like this already.
Because there are a number of cremation plots, I forget the number, so there's some that have been done this way. There are a dozen that haven't, including the one where this request is coming from. Quite why there's been a difference over the years, I have no idea. However, I think originally it was down to cost, but it's not actually that expensive.
So, for members' consideration on this one, to bring each plot up to the standard of the others, we're looking at about £45 plus some of the maintenance team's time per plot. There's 11 plots, so we're looking at about £500 to bring them all up to the same standards.
I want you going to be for maintenance. Could you make grass?
There isn't grass there, it's the cremation stones.
Now, if you do agree to bring them all up, it wouldn't be that amount all in one go, because we will be phasing them in over the next months or so to bring it up to the standard of the rest.
Well, I personally think it would be fair to have them same as everybody else's. Is this what this one is asking for? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's just to bring it to
We
the
sort of
same as
next
everyone
level,
else.
just got to be one off like, right. I suppose it. You know, I think,
On a phased basis.
Who ran to get permission from the other?
That's what we'll actually do with the phased section is we will basically we'll contact the information where we can, and what we'll actually do where we've not been able to get them before work starts, we'll actually post a notice on the actual site and give sort of 4 weeks notice that we're going to start to do it.
if somebody doesn't want it done, we're not going to force them.
4 weeks time.
No, I can't say we don't.
We've got to be respectful
Yeah.
where we can. But it is actually an improvement on
Yeah, I can't imagine anybody not.
So, proposal, seconder, if there's no amendments to that proposal, show of hands for. Thank you.
Can the clerk contact Mr Davis and tell him that straight away in case it's one of the last plots to be
I
done?
think he might be the first one to be done.
So, item 10.
Sorry,
Yes.
it says in the letter, a sheet of black material which I will purchase. We're actually purchasing the material, so it's all in the
Correct.
Yeah.
He offered to purchase for his own one, so to do the building and then to standards here, that's why I purchased
If you start letting people do their own thing.
No, I'm just clarifying that, no, because it says in his letter that he will be purchasing the black material.
We're going to do it. Okay, so 10C, Coronation Park.
Yeah, what it is, as Paul knows, on World War I celebrations, we used PAs written to talk a little louder as you can on their own voice. And obviously, on our estate, we use an RPA system as well. The problem is we've been using a generator which is rather noisy, and when it is silent, we can't, even though it's a silent generator, you can still hear it. There is actually an electric box at the back of the bus stop, which is for the power for the cenotaph to be lit up. What we're proposing is that we actually have a socket, a plug socket inside the box, which will be locked, but obviously we can use it for harnesses there, etc. Workers need to jet wash anything like that, power will be there. It just saves a lot of problems and noise, you know, especially noise.
Okay, I think we've got an estimated cost of about £100. Proposal? Second. Okay, so show of hands for. Thank you. Right, if we can move on to item 11, which is monthly account schedule and relevant budget update information. Item A is approval of the monthly accounts. You've got them there, and I do believe they all went out by email before this meeting today. Did everyone receive them? Do you think so? Right, well, if we can go through the accounts. We have the spreadsheet there with all the items. Are there any questions on those?
Just one or two items I'd like to bring up. This electrical work, is that electrical work been sanctioned last time?
Whereabouts is it?
3 lots of electrical work by contract electricians.
Yes, they were approved. Yeah.
It was the ones we agreed to.
Correct.
Another point, the iron and chipper. Aren't we in possession of the chipper we purchased?
If we are, it certainly wasn't one that was suitable for the task at hand.
We bought a chipper, we purchased a chipper, a proper chipper. More than 2
the team were trying to get the work carried out in time for the World War celebrations down at the War Memorial, and the chip that we'd got was really not fit for purpose. It meant that they had to chip small amounts and then take it back up on the van and take it back to the forward, so we hired a chipper so that we could get the work done a lot quicker.
In time for the
In time for the World.
So the chipper was purchased?
No.
Years ago, when I was younger.
No,
It's purchased, but it wasn't.
it's okay for general maintenance, I think is what it says. But the amount of work needed in the time scale that they have, the only way they can do it is to hire one.
Well, we purchased one. And also, another point is the cement mixer. Have we got enough work to buy a cement mixer?
Yeah, that's particularly in the grade, particularly the headstones and the cremation sites.
How long will we be doing that? We do more than we are. That's all. Can you explain this cemetery electric, this overcharge we've been, is that what we've been paid back? And what was the overcharge for initially?
Yeah, it was an overestimate by £100.
Right, for the cemetery?
Correct. We can bring it today on the previous question you've raised on the electrical thing. We then have in total of £200 close to £1,500
pillars in the street. And did they explain how they were charging us for them? Why did they were charging us these amounts?
It's a conversation that the council's had with them on a fairly frequent basis. We are getting representatives from them coming out in the very near future to discuss the whole feeder pillar usage, standing charges, and we're having to review our curriculum and see what we can do to make it better.
Is it one feeder pillar what's causing the problem?
There was one particular one this time.
And was this overcharge deducted off this amount then? It's £205. Well, we've got £636.45 for the cemetery electric.
Yeah.
Where did, has that 205 come on and where's that?
Yes, it has.
Because it seems a large amount for electric for the cemetery. When we only pay £1,700 for the lyric. And this place is nearly all the time. And that brings it up to nearly £850 for a cemetery.
Just looking.
Yeah, Louis next door.
I think we've got to keep a check on these, like the water situation. About 18 months is astronomical. If there's a big bill, we must chase it up, because these firms are never going to come and just give us money back.
Yeah, the electricity company are actually charging us a standard charge like you're on any house. But they're estimating that what we'd used at Christmas for the Christmas lights, because we were paying the standing charge, then we were paying the usage as well for the Christmas lights.
Yeah.
And then the meter readings weren't being read regularly, so the charging was roughly the same every quarter, even though we stood out for the rest of the year. So it's that we've had to claw back really and work out. But we have got it back, and as the clock has just said, it's actually going to, we're having a review of all the electrical outlets, so we can hopefully get them a lot cheaper as well.
It's just this amount for the cemetery. It just seems astronomical that we're paying. If that was took off the figure we're paying, 600 knock, it's 800 knock pound for the cemetery. What electric is in cemetery for 800 knock pound?
Well, what I suggest,
yeah,
we'll look into it far more.
Yeah, that's right.
And if we can get the finance officer to look and come back to us by email, or possibly at the next meeting.
Yeah, yes.
Rather. We'll take it on board and bring it back. Any other items on the accounts? No? Okay. You've also got a budget comparison there, but that will be approved. Just the approval for the monthly accounts. Fran's moved and Brian second. Show hands for. Uh, 11B, to consider the Silverdale's Edge quotes. We brought this to council at the last meeting with a price, and members said that they wanted at least 2 more quotes before we make a decision. We've got the quotes in, and we can supply the quotes for you, but both came in above £600 from the initial quotation. So basically, if you do need to see them, we can email them out to you. Otherwise, if you want to make a decision based on the initial one being the lowest quote, we can move on it. Propose that we go with the initial quote.
But why haven't we got copies of that? 2 quotes now.
But as I said, we can scan the emails to you.
I'm just asking why we asked the
Today. You can tell an approximate price, actually, I think.
One was 870, the one was 945. So not just above the
How much would you charge me to cut through
we've got a proposal to go with the
Oh,
initial
that's
quote
what
of
I'm like.
600.
It's a lot of money for edges, isn't
Can we
it?
have a seconder?
I have to spend now.
Show hands for £600. Paul. 11C is external auditors report. You've got the report there, a covering letter from BDO. Does anyone have any questions about it? So basically all I need is that we move to accept the report. Seconder? Show of hands to accept that report. So we're now on to item 12A, which is to consider an application for a grant for a computer for a charitable project by the Royal Elephant for young adults with learning difficulties. You have the information there. Please discuss.
Speak up, please.
She's asking how much money we've got left in the grants.
We've got quite a million quid of that.
2,500.
Yes. Order, please.
State schools for the benefit
A week.
at the moment. Is that a week? At the moment. I think really that's a fantastic charity. My only two concerns are, I haven't got a bank account, that's part of the criteria, and we've got a bank statement. That's part of the criteria submitted for that, is to provide a bank statement. We have got a bank statement.
Could you speak up, please?
Well, yeah.
Basically, councillors asking.
Carry on.
We will speak up.
Yeah,
Basically, we're asking if we have the actual bank statement.
one is the bank statement that obviously is not submitted to this board. My only concern is that the computer is going to be upstairs in the Royal Elephant. Now, I think for it to benefit more people, is it going to be accessible all the time? Yes. Because I'm a bit of concern that you with private business upstairs when it could be somewhere that people could use all the time. I don't know what that might be, whether that's salvation or that the era. Yeah.
Polly?
Well, you're saying only 8 students a week.
Yeah.
They are special needs.
Yeah, no.
And what he's doing is trying to give them skills so they can go out and get a job. They've got a room for hairdressing. I think it's for a couple of hairdressers. He's got a room for teaching them hygiene. He's teaching them cooking. The IT, he wants to learn to be on CVs. But at the top of that, these students have to have specialised people looking after them. You mentioned MenCap. Right, MenCap would have come in and took it over to fund it. But Patrick Rush's idea is for the local people. He's trying to give back to local people. MenCap wanted to come in and it would have been sort of everybody from, that wasn't Patrick's idea. So what he was wanting is maybe all that upstairs is for, from what I've read out,
council or in the public, if you go and see the gentleman there, anytime he will take you round and look upstairs and you'll see and he will say, you're doing a good job. And why he doesn't want the men cap coming into it, he said he would help. They want to take over his building upstairs. And they want to go out to as far as Nottingham. Lincoln. He doesn't want that. He wants it in Dinnington alone for our community. That's the gentleman, the elephant. Not for anywhere else, just for Dinnington.
Yeah, I really do think it is a word and
And anybody can go see it there.
I've got some information actually as well, just been talking to Clark. As far as the bank account and statements, it's given us the bank account details, but it is the bank account that is run through the Royal Elephant, so he didn't want to actually give us sensitive details of his actual personal business.
I thought he had done that.
Well, he's not sent us this, he's given us that information. I've got not a proposal, but something that we can do in your consideration. I think it's very difficult for us just to give £500 to a private business. It's absolutely worthy, but I think public money you can't just give to a private business like that because it's used
The
correctly.
private business is a restaurant, but upstairs is not a private business.
So it's a bank account for a business. That's where we
If I could just bring Stephen first.
Just like I say, with it being a private business, has he got charity, is he using charity?
No, no.
So he's not actually a resident of charity, is he?
No.
Bring Paul in. Sorry.
Can I suggest instead of giving money, he purchased a computer and then there's no money exchange in hands?
Yep. In one of the sections, we'll have to see absolute on this one. We'll think 137. We can buy equipment and donate it to the good of the community. They don't necessarily have to have a charitable status. That is also then making sure if we purchase the computer and donate it to this worthy cause, it's not giving them the money away, so we know it's going to do exactly what we want it to do. So that's an option for you. Okay. Once we've got the amount, we'll have to bring it back with the actual amount, I mean, how quickly is the gentleman wanting to get this on?
Somebody he's got his hairdressing place going, he's got his kitchen going, he's got a roof board that he wants to sit and talk, and the other room is where he wants to computer, and this way he wants to start that off as soon as possible.
We're not actually voting on monitoring. Can we not just agree that to supply a computer up to a value, then it's hands-on through, so it's...
Give it to the funds.
Can I suggest that we actually purchase one of the loan? That money is still the town council's computer.
That could cause more problems because then we would actually then be responsible every year to have to go and maintenance, pack testing, and liability. It would be cleaner just to donate.
Eventually, we're going to make a business out of this upstairs. When you're talking about hairdressing, this happens.
I mean, I would imagine it's been running many years. It's got its own IT.
It's not the air, but then that's Lincoln.
There's a few councils on this panel who have actually been seen it, so I mean, I'm sure if they've actually seen where it's going and the kind of environment it's in, we know it's not for a private business.
It's not a problem. I have been up there and I took 40 days to do
Put that money into his own personal bank. It is not right. Well, I have no problem with it there, and that's
I don't think.
things like that from your own bank account. Start doing that, you can have these
Well, we've got an option on the different. Are we going to get?
If we go down and just donate the computer and just say to him, in future, if he puts grants in, he will need a separate bank account for that endeavour. Yeah?
Yeah, if we want any further
If he
support.
wants any further support.
Chair, Chair, it's the only one that's so it's right for the secretary.
Yeah, well, what we've got to do is make the cost see subject to us being able to do it anyway. Do we have a proposal what you would like to do based on that?
Donate to the value of.
Yeah.
I feel more comfortable if we give a small presentation on what's I think that would be better than it tells us his own, you know, his own words.
And meantime, Clark can look into whether donation of electrical equipment is within the rules.
There is a proposal on the table there.
Okay, so we've got a proposal that we purchase and donate a computer up to the value of £500. And an amendment that we hold off to the next meeting, seek a presentation and then make a decision on the right. Okay, so vote on the amendment first.
Can I suggest that councillors go and see Patrick and then show him round the premises themselves? I think you might find it hard for him to come down there at night time. He's running his restaurant.
Well, the amendment's been made, so I've got to.
We're actually closed on Monday, so.
I've got to take the amendment
There was
first.
people up there on Monday as well, so it's not shut, it's shut to public, but it's not to the matter. So it's time in getting here, so like I said, if people want to meet him up there, he will show you everything what I've seen, and you'll be surprised. So I think if he has to meet him up there, go and see him up there, and see what he wants.
But I've got to deal with the amendment first. So, a show of hands that we defer the decision to the next meeting and ask the gentleman to come and do a presentation of what he wants to do. Show of hands for that. Four. And for the initial motion to donate the equipment up to a value of, show of hands. So, the initial motion is approved. Right, move on to item 13. Now, we've got general matters, which is the running fire. Issue 1 is now closed. Issue 2
Paperwork on that, Chair.
I'll read it out, I've only got this one. But basically, issue 2 is the Falcon Cross Memorial repair to the steps, which has gone through, but we've still got the issue of the perspex sign being broken. We've looked into it, and it's a little more complicated than we thought, because it's not just a printed board with a perspex cover. It's actually a very thick piece of perspex that's been printed on the back. We've sought to try and get the repair done through Rotherham Borough Council or the fund that initially did it, and it was a one-off, and the fund no longer exists. So what we're looking to try to do is get the costings for us to actually replace it ourselves.
Just said it's
Yeah.
We just said it's printed on the side of the perspex. But if there's a way so that we could have something way printed, would it be like, just change the, I don't know, whether it's just enamel or something, but it'll probably get broken again. So it might be, if it were cheaper, just to keep replacing the perspex.
That's the idea, exactly the idea, Councillor Davis. It's the way it's been made at the moment, we can't just lift the original artwork off. What I'm trying to find out at the moment is if anybody's got a copy of the original artwork. Because if we haven't, that's where the expense will be to recreate it.
Jackie Atherton probably got a copy. Jackie Atherton. Can't be here.
So I suggest if you may speak up.
Is there lots out there on it? Because don't you be going in Mecca?
There's a lot of words on it.
Is there?
Yeah.
Right, I think Member of the Public's got a pertinent point that he wants to come in. I'm afraid I'm going to have to see the motion that Mr. Jensen has been. So we propose. And a second, show of hands. Please.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I'm probably the one that's been chipping away at this, and also the steps to the cross for the last 18 months. The sign has actually been, or the plaque has, or it's called, been now removed. I'm not sure whether you've done that or
Yes, we have.
you've done that. Well, thank goodness somebody's got around to it, because obviously the Borough Council are not doing anything. I must say, what you've said about the way it was created in the first place, I find incredibly stupid, really. Just do something that's that expensive, print on the back of it, and then you've got no backup. And really what you want is a sealed unit with something that you can keep copying up for as many times as you want. If that gets broken, all you've got to do is replace the outer glass or whatever. I mean, we've got some at Anston that have been done, they're on that basis that either it's screwed in or whatever, and then if it gets damaged, we just take it off and replace the glass. But to keep doing the way you've done is, unless you've got the artwork, is a horrendous expenditure, because it's odds on that it'll happen again. It's odds law that somebody else will have a go at it. And with it just being in a non-framed unit like it was, I think it was just set in perspex, as I say, is a bit of a stupid way of doing it. So I'm glad you're looking at other options. I think the best thing is to see, you know, obviously what else you can come up with as a way of doing it. And then if it gets damaged again, it's like the signboards, isn't it? You just take the front piece off and you put a new backing piece on that's the same reproduction as before. So I'm glad somebody's actually got around to it. I think if we'd have been waiting for the Borough Council, it can still be in there next year. I'd rather see it away and have to pounds away again and get something done about it. So I'm pleased you've taken that action at the end of the day.
We are looking at, as I said, one start, though it's a little more complicated, unfortunately, because we've got to try and track down this artwork.
Yeah.
But hopefully, if Councillor Davis is the right person, because you were involved in it at the start, we'll start, and then we can bring it back to council once we've got some prices.
Okay.
Anything else anyone wants to say on the sign? One item. No, okay. So we're still open until we get that. So moving on, item 3 and 4 are closed. Item 5 is a freedom of information for Birkdale. It's still ongoing. We're working closely with other partners in trying to get this done. We've had some information back from the Information Commissioner, who advises that we resubmit the freedom of information request in a slightly different way. They are actually dealt with at the moment, but at the moment there's no more information that we can give you until we resubmit. Okay? So it's still... That's right, yeah. So that's still open. Item 6 and 7 are closed. Item 8 is the mechanisms for influencing RMBC policy. We did put together a detailed list of all the routes and methods that we've got to do that. I'll propose it on the website. And members have all been issued it as well. So I'd like to ask if we can close that issue now. Show of hands that we can close issue A. Issue 9 is the throw pump signage. It's still left dormant in that we contacted the person that originally brought the item to us. We've had no response back. I wouldn't like to close it yet, just because they haven't come back to us, but we'll just have to leave it dormant until we do. Okay? And issue 10 is the community defibrillator. We have arranged another meeting on the 23rd of October. Have we the time? Yeah. Okay. 6:30 at the Lyric on the 23rd. All members who are interested, and I would like as many as we can get there to have a viable meeting. Public are invited as well. We welcome all your comments if you come to the meeting. It is something that we want to do. We've talked long and hard about this, and we would like to start trying to get something moving with it. So we're all welcome, and if you want to pass that on to other parties as well that may be interested. Okay, so just to reiterate, 23rd.
What, this month?
Yes, sorry.
I'm away.
6:30 here. And I think we're tied, it's quite tight. We've only have about 50 minutes, so we'll have to be here prompt for the meeting.
Sorry, Chair.
No, we've brought you in to speak on the running file, and the running file is open, so we'll have to speak.
Yeah, I was going to say, so I think in future, shall I ask for a blanket approval at the start of the meeting? Don't keep raising your hands, it might be easy.
Well, we can't do it, unfortunately.
I know, it's, can I just say, I've been invited, I did say after the last meeting I'll be interested in attending, but unfortunately I've got another meeting that night, which is sod though it's fallen same time, and now I've got one at elsewhere at Anston, so I would like to have attended. I've contacted the clerk and asked him if he'll update me as to what happens at the meeting, and then say if you have any more after that, then I'll try and attend. And if I can just throw this other one in, it's slightly, not do with that, it's the condition of Lawton Road and Falcon Square. Can I say how much better it looks now? We've got to grips, or somebody has, with the wheat spraying. It's amazing the difference it makes not having little green things waving at you when you walk down the road. If we can get the gullies emptied next time, I think we should might be making a bit of progress, so thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Right, okay, so just to reiterate, 23rd of October, 6:30 here. That one's ongoing. That completes the running file. So we'll just move on to the last item, which is the date and time of the next meeting, which is the 10th of November at 7 o'clock here. Yeah. Thank you very much for your time. I'll now close the meeting.